Okay, you may have heard of the term. Maybe you thought about it when you looked at the title for today, fog of war. I'm going to use this concept as the framework for strengthening our own resolve to remain full of faith. Not just I'm hanging on, but like excited, joyful, faithful, fully when we experience career fog, when things are just not that clear for us. We're in a bit of, let's say, a haze about maybe what's next, or sometimes, as has happened to me, an all-out panic because I don't quite understand what's happening. As I do this, I'm asking us to relate what I'm about to tell you to our career. I'll throw in some reminders to do that and frame it as such, but this is the framework of the military term fog of war. This concept describes the uncertainty soldiers experience during military engagements. This uncertainty can be about, believe it or not, their own capabilities, the enemy's readiness to face them. Like when you go to, surprise somebody, it might be a little foggy if they're ready and waiting for you, the enemy's capabilities and the enemy's ultimate intentions. The fog of war is not something any military action has ever desired. It's not something we want. It's not a strategy by any stretch, but it is always expected, always, and always planned for. That's because unwanted outcomes happen all the time in war and, of course, in our own career. I want to recommend a documentary. It's called The Fog of War by Errol Morris did it, but it's about this guy named Robert McNamara. One of the best documentaries I've ever seen. And I am not a war buff or a war documentary guy. Yes, I was in the Navy, but I don't even have my uniforms anymore. I'm not into military history or anything, but it's about this guy, Robert McNamara, the first ever president of Ford Motor Company that was not in the Ford family. He was that brilliant. They hired him for consulting work, and then they were so impressed by what he could do, they made him president of Ford. His brilliance was eventually recognized by the US government, so he was stolen away by Kennedy, JFK, to become his Secretary of Defense. Robert McNamara was Secretary of Defense from 1961 to 1968 and is still the longest running Secretary of Defense ever. He, of course, was through the Lyndon B. Johnson presidential era as well. He was responsible for instituting a system of analysis in public policy known as policy analysis because of his brilliant thinking. This documentary goes into that, but it's more of a documentary he wanted to do so he could personally highlight the worst mistakes he made in his reign as Secretary of Defense as kind of like an apology. Having said that, Karl von Clausewitz is the one who actually created the original concept of fog of war. And it was in a book that he wrote called Vom Krieg, or On War. And it took him 27 years to write the book, and he couldn't even publish it before he died. He was such a perfectionist, he didn't feel good about publishing it. His wife did after he died. He says this: war is the realm of uncertainty. 3/4 of the factors on which any war action is based are wrapped in a fog of greater or lesser uncertainty. So he's saying wartime actions are based on 4 factors, always, 3 of which, according to Clausewitz, are wrapped in the unknown. The unknown unknown. I can't know. Although I didn't read that book, it has been translated obviously into English. I did listen to a lecture on his work and read a few pieces online. And his point of view is, his approach is, mastering this 4th element of wartime action is what ultimately helps create more certainty in managing the fog of the other 3. So I'm going to start with the first 3, the ones that are very uncertain. And as I cover this, again, please think of how this is going to parallel with what you go through in your career, have been through, are going through, might go through. And then I'm going to move on to the one area of certainty I'll wait to reveal that in just a moment. Okay, the 3 wartime activities that exist in a fog, as Clausewitz said, of greater or lesser uncertainty, are violence, chance, and reason. I'm going to define them for you. Before I do, by the way, we've all heard of Sun Tzu's Art of War. Clausewitz, his work is at that same level. So people are considered Sun Tzuian or Clausewitzian. I know that sounds ridiculous, but this is what I've been learning as I've prepared for this material and did a lot of research on it. Okay? The 3 areas of wartime effort and activity that have a fog surrounding them are violence, chance, and reason. Let's start with violence. This is obviously physical force used in war, and it is inherently unpredictable. Think of wars going on right now. Who would have predicted that the leader of one country would bomb hospitals of another? We can't know how far the enemy will go in their level of violence, because violence obviously involves direct confrontation. It means there is a potential for significant loss of life and resources. Therefore, the fogginess around violence is because of the very profoundly high stakes involved. That means when we are not ready to handle the violence, things will get foggy very quickly. In our career, this could mean verbal abuse. It can mean harassment at all levels, threats, intimidation, psychological drama. But I am not talking about outright illegal actions like assaulting, someone putting their hands on you, someone menacing like they're threatening to hurt you physically, stealing from you. That's not what I'm talking about here with this career violence. Yeah, military violence, that's what it means. But I'm hoping to prep us for the level of violence that we might see in our career in this diminutive way. Violence in our career fog context could also be as, let's say, minute as passive aggression. I mean, it's an incredibly common and terribly disruptive. This could also mean violence, could also mean gaslighting, where someone is telling you that the way you remember things is wrong, and you're wrong about the things. Maybe you wrote it down wrong. Yeah, I saw your meeting notes, but that's not what I said. That's even a form of, in a sense, violence. So, for the sake of the faithfulness that we want to have in our own career fog, I'm asking you to consider this can also be people who are just more direct than we would be. And because they're direct, we look at that directness as a confrontation that we don't want, that we don't like. And we think because they're direct and we aren't, their behavior is inappropriate. And by this, I mean they may not be doing anything unethical, improper, and yet we walk away from that encounter thinking we've just been assaulted. A few years ago, this term came onto the marketplace, microaggressions. Like, hey, you looked at me a certain way. I know what you're thinking. And that has become a low, tiny level of violence that we have now, some of us, let rock us and completely throw us off balance. And we get in a real funk very quickly because someone is just being direct with us. Thinking someone is being too direct with us, we can sometimes say things like, you can't talk to me like that, and really get intense back at them, raising our intensity way more than anything that they did by just being direct. I want us to consider, for our own sake of career fog, it could also be that when I say violence. All right, now let's go to chance. Chance, the second factor that creates a fog of war, is the random and unforeseen events that always occur in war. And yes, our career. For the sake of war, this might include unexpected weather changes. An army marching into the German army marching into Russia and not realizing how cold Russian winters are. This might include accidents that no one expected and couldn't have been prevented. Sudden shifts in battlefield situations. I can't list all of them. There's hundreds of them, but chance basically introduces an element of unpredictability because it can alter the plan that we had right before the quote unquote skirmish. If the chance encounter is big enough, it might even require that we change our entire strategy in the wartime theater, let's say, because we can't anticipate or control chance. We can't. This is a biblical concept, of course. We see it captured perfectly in Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 11. I have seen something else under the sun. The race is not to the swift or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the learned, but time and chance happen to them all. That's a hard pill to swallow, isn't it? Doesn't matter how brilliant you are, things might just not go as well as you would like. What are some things that happen by chance in and around the workplace, in our industry, in our career? Maybe these are obvious, but market crashes. That's chance, can't control that. Natural disasters, tech breakthroughs. I'm looking at you, AI. Regulatory changes, pandemics. Can I get a text amen on that? Cyber attacks, like what happened with Sony. Mergers and acquisitions. Your company gets acquired. You're now instantly redundant. Rapid shifts in consumer trends for whatever reason. Like, YouTube coming on the scene, and who would have expected it would have replaced TV, Leadership changes. I went into Avid, hired by this person who loved me, Jody Sweeney, and then after 2 years, she got canned when a new chairman of the board came onto the scene. He fired the president, fired all the senior executives, and now we took the Adobe Adobe VP, Rick Lowenstein, and now I'm reporting to Rick Lowenstein. Great guy, but was not Jody Sweeney by any stretch. Geopolitical events, okay? This could also be disabilities that we didn't expect or want. Extreme prolonged illness, even death in our family that kind of rocks us. These all happens for reasons we could never know or understand. They happen, as Solomon tells us, by chance. Okay, the third wartime action that is cloaked in varying levels of uncertainty is reason. This involves, and I want you to hear this word, and I really mean it, rational decision making. Rational. The process commanders and leaders use to resolve risks that they encounter. They use their own rational, legitimate reasoning, and it creates a fog for us or for the soldiers sent into the battle. Even though reasoning is by nature supposed to bring logic and strategy, right? That's why we take time to reason things out. It's still subject to human error. Humans are by nature faulty. Humans have misjudgment surrounding them. And the influence of incomplete, or misleading information can really alter how someone reasons through a situation. You give them bad data, misinformation, fake news, it could create in that leadership team decisions that will create a fog around us, okay? Human reasoning leads to uncertainty. The executives that lead us don't sit around looking for ways to make life miserable for us. They're people. They have compassion and kindness, even though we sometimes think they're machines. They will agonize over the judgments and decisions that they make because they're making it based on information that they have access to, what they know about the market, what can be known about the market, the overall performance of a company, the trends that are happening in the workplace or the economy. And they use that information to the very best of their ability, and using their reasoning and their team around them, they make choices that affect us. Yes, this also means sometimes really, really poor, inexcusable judgment. And this picture I'm using to illustrate things like nepotism, where a leader will hire a really young relative for a role that leaves us kind of scratching our heads like, wait, what? You're making your son the chief of staff? Are you kidding? What experience does your son have? I mean, this happens all the time in politics. We see it, but it can happen in our company too. This happens. Very poor judgment. Or how about human reasoning, which is responsible when things seem to run like a monarchy, where the leader is really prideful and arrogant and they're kind of puffed up all the time. Their arrogance is overflowing. Yeah, that's based on human reasoning too. The leader just wants to be worshiped and praised. I've worked for someone like that. Someone who worshiped Steve Jobs, had, no kidding, a shrine in his office with candles and a lattice and pictures and flowers with Steve Jobs' picture in it. I'm not kidding you. And he believed he was supposed to act like Steve Jobs. So all those years, Steve Jobs just really ground everyone's face in the dirt. That's how this guy led. If I would have known that, I would never come to work for him. I ran the global professional services team, and he deliberately made life miserable for me. He wanted me to worship him like he worshiped Steve Jobs. People that tend to display this more than the rest are those who run small businesses, because they have just talked a bunch of people into giving them hundreds of millions of dollars, seed money, funding, and it gets to their head. They start thinking that there's something that they're not. Okay, just as a quick coaching frame, these three things obviously are external blockers. We can't do anything about them. We can't. Yes, what I'm about to show you is how to minimize the impact of the risk that exists, maybe even how to reduce some of the risk, but we can never eliminate it. And most of the time, obviously, especially chance, we can't even touch it. There's nothing we can do to remove the risk of chance, really. In his work, Clausewitz said this: our task, therefore, meaning in lieu of violence, chance, and reason, is to develop a theory that maintains a balance between these three tendencies, like an object suspended and hovering between three magnets. That means we never want, the thing to go really far to one of the three. We don't want to let that happen. So we create a theory to maintain the best we can balanced. How is this managed? Obviously, it's through the fourth piece of the pie. It's policy. Through the fourth piece of the wartime puzzle, policy, we can provide a more stable and predictable framework where those other three elements can be offset some, managed some after they happen, wrangled, like cats, mitigated some, mitigating the intensity. That's the balance. Policy and the uncompromising commitment to that policy allows for guidelines of our response to the unpredictable violence, chance, and reason. So I want to touch on this. We're going to dig into this because this is what the whole presentation is about. I wanted you to know about those three unpredictable things so you can see them as they're happening in their career, knowing they're going to happen. You're not going to be able to stop them from happening. They will. Instead of it creating a fog around us where we're like wandering around dazed, wanting to shut down, wanting to quit, running out the door, we can create a policy, which I'm going to show you how to do it right now, to keep the fogginess as minimized as possible. Okay? This framework directly applies to war, but I'm asking you to consider how does it parallel your career, and I'm going to show you how exactly. Strong policy means having a well-defined strategic direction, a well-defined set of rules and regulations, a clear idea of how all resources are going to be aligned or allocated, thoughtful and intentional diplomatic steps, and then consistency and continuity. That's policy. Those are a lot of words. I'm going to try to make it a little bit easier by boiling them all each down to one word each. Strategy, regulations, allocation, diplomacy, and consistency, okay? This will make it a little bit easier for us. This is what makes up policy. And if we take the time to define these incredibly well, we are going to have much lesser impact fogginess when things hit us. Let me get into each one of these. Starting with strategy, strategic direction. This represents our long-term goals and interests. How clear is that to us? How clear is our long-term professional goals and even our interests? This is about knowing our why, what we plan for in the far-off future. Having this in mind professionally will help us manage the fog when the inevitable, unexpected, unwanted outcomes arrive. We take the time to deeply consider and, yes, document, write out our long-term career goals and interests so it is crystal clear to us at the front of mind. Then, when the unwanted violence, chance, or poor human reasoning happen, knowing our long-term goals helps us to quickly course correct. It allows us to very quickly assess available options to us. Knowing this will allow us to very quickly pivot because we can go back, pull out this thing we documented and refer to that strategic direction, and then come up with a simple list of possible responses to it. Then it's not going to feel like we're in a free fall, completely overwhelmed by the violence, chance, or reasoning that just happened. We won't be helpless, okay? That's strategy. Regulations, the second one. This is our code of conduct. What we determined far ahead of time, which I'm saying right now if you don't already know this, to determine how far we're going to stoop when things go awry. I can get pretty nasty, let me tell you. I don't like that part of myself. I'm definitely not bragging about it. It's disgusting. If I don't have rules and regulations about how I'm going to engage with different types of violence, chance, and reason, I could lose my mind. I have lost my mind. I'm not going to, if you guys want an example, I'll tell you, but I'm not going to volunteer it. I'll volunteer to tell you if you ask. How intense is our response going to be? How will we hold ourselves during the conflict? Even what level of legal action we will or will not engage with. I forgot to write this down, but in Corinthians, I think, Paul's like, you're suing each other. You're taking each other to court, right? That's within the church, but we want to understand what we're going to do, how far we'll go even legally when things go off the rails at work, which they're going to do. It's important to have this already mapped out. In the U.S. military, I don't know, there's a lot of people from lots of other countries on the call now, of course. I don't know what you guys have specifically, but there are a couple of things that the whole world has, like the Geneva Convention. That's a set of rules and regulations that all countries have agreed to. The Hague Agreement. U.S. military rules and regulations like the Hague Agreement, the Geneva Convention, UCMJ, they provide guidelines on things like the types of weapons we are going to use before we even get into war. We just make a commitment. I'm never going to use napalm ever again. We're never going to use weapons of mass destruction ever again, right? How to treat prisoners of war. The guidelines for whether we're ever going to attack civilians, when we're going to initiate combat, how we treat the sick and the wounded on the battlefield, right? We want to have something similar to that. Where we're going to go. Are we going to say, you're being racist? I did that once. I had a boss that treated me in such a way that was so inexplicable that I decided to write like a 13-page report to show why him giving me his end-of-year assessment, a development needed. I've only gotten one my whole career, and it's from him. It didn't make any sense. I had a mountain of digital evidence, of numerical evidence to prove like I was one of the top performers on the team, but for some reason, he gave me development needed. He always had a chip on his shoulder about me. So I went to HR, I took advantage of a system that GE uses, and I had it overturned because HR thought, yeah, this guy might be being prejudiced toward you, because it didn't make sense to them, and they reprimanded him. He ended up getting demoted. We want to know ahead of time what we'll do, how far we'll go. If we don't, we are going to, in the heat of the moment, do things that we are going to greatly regret. I know I have. That's why I'm doing this with you now, but many years ago in my career, okay? As Christians, we obviously have the ultimate code of justice, code of conduct, right? The life of Christ. keeping in step with the Spirit, Romans 7, following the living word. The thing is, I think, we don't often consider how to create intentional written out guidelines for our workplace responses when violence, chance, and reasoning, poor human reasoning, occur. We don't. How do I respond when I'm provoked? What does the Bible say? I'm going to write them all out ahead of time before it happens, so I know. What does the Bible say about what to do when God's final decisions conflict with what I ultimately wanted in my career, in this company, in this role? What does the Bible say about it? Then write it out. What do I do when my boss is not the kind of leader I thrive under? When they make choices that are clearly not in the best interest of me, my colleagues, or the company? What does the Bible say about how to deal with a narcissist boss? How can I make sure I am daily equipped with the armor of God when I walk into a toxic workplace environment every day? When I work around really aggressive fellow employees, or I'm constantly confronted by unhappy customers? What does the Bible say about that? We follow the master of the universe. Can I get an amen? Okay, a silent amen. The creator of all creation. He's got the answer for how to deal with any fog that we come upon. All right. Allocation, the third one, it's our financial efficiency and preparation. Being ready for the unexpected instead of living paycheck to paycheck. Instead of being over leveraged, meaning we have way too much debt. Instead, we have a thought out, well-planned budget. As a contingency, we have savings in the bank for those times when we get fired abruptly or downsized, or we are put back one level. I can't think of the word of it, demoted. When we have that kind of planning, we have something to hold us over for 5 or 6 months, an actual financial contingency plan. These are our resources. I didn't put the slides up here, but it just dawned on me. This could also mean allocating time to work out and stay in great health. Allocating time to take a breather, give our brain a chance to rest during the week instead of working 60 hours a week. That's also part of allocation. Preparing for when we have enough cognitive reserves that we're not so spread so thin that when violence, chance, and reason happen, we blow up. That's part also of allocating our resources. Diplomacy means alliances that we have formed within the company so that we don't feel like everybody's against us. We have some people on our side outside the company within our industry. It also means our willingness and our ability to negotiate, as in being ready to negotiate when things do not go our way. That means I'm saying, please constantly build out your network. Make it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. I think I'm overdo that. And only connect with people that you know and trust that you can call on in the time of need. The larger your network is, that means maintaining diplomatic relationships with all these different people, the lesser of an impact violence, chance, and reason are going to have. We also want to be well connected within our company, across departments, not just knowing everyone in our little department, get to know people all across the company, all up and down the chain of command. And diplomacy means we absolutely refuse to burn any bridges with our current company when something egregious happens to us. We just do not do that. We be diplomatic about it. We keep a cool head and lean on the path of humility. Matthew 5 says, 38 through 40 says, you have heard that it was said eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. Well, think about that as a part of a diplomatic policy when violence, chance, and reason don't go your way. The final one is consistency. This is our commitment to the plan, not changing things up, being stable, holding to it, even though once the thing happens that we don't like, We want to alter the plan. Don't do it. Be unmovable. Yes, we can make small improvements to our policy as we age and mature, as things change in the economy, in our family, whatever. We can alter it, but we're not doing a massive change in the moment. Okay? That's continuous improvement. Then, consistency requires, as part of our policy, we review the plan every so often, maybe once a year. We keep it documented as, let's call it, a standard operating procedure. Our wartime policy during the fog of war, call it that, and then list it out. Have it top of mind, and then, of course, commit it to God. For the sake of time, I'm not going to read Psalm 37, 5 through 9. Please go back and read this. It's about committing our way to the Lord. We can't control other things. We can't. Psalm 37, 5 through 9 says that. In fact, all of Psalm 37 is amazing. All right. To make it even easier to remember, I have rearranged these words to form an anagram. Cards, continuity, allocation, regulations, diplomacy, and strategy. This is the royal flush, the hand that beats the fog of war. It keeps it at bay. It is our plan, our policy. We keep it close to the vest, like when we're playing cards. We protect it. And we remember at all times, many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. So even our royal flush might, not be able to deal with what God has in store for us. So we can adjust. We don't panic and freak out. We keep a level head, but we adjust. Eisenhower, one of America's greatest wartime leaders and one of only a handful of five-star generals, said this: I have found that in times of war, plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. He's alluding to the fog of war, to unexpected violence, chance, and reason, the things that create uncertain and unwanted outcomes. And yet, taking the time to create a plan, commit it to God, is how we remain faithful during career fog. Planning like this is indispensable. This is how to thrive in those situations, by making sure we're ready before they even happen. Now, maybe they've already happened to you. That's fine. We don't want to beat ourselves up. But we can plan now. I'm going to read a few more verses and then we're going to end. Open it up for Q&A. I think Paul had it right when he wrote this in Romans 11:33. Oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable his judgments and his paths beyond tracing out. If we have a plan, the best we can do is follow through on the plan. God's got the rest. Deuteronomy 29:29. The secret things belong to the Lord, but the things revealed belong to our children forever, that we may follow the words of his law. Okay. Last one. When times are good, be happy. When times are bad, consider this: God has made one as well as the other. Therefore, no one can discover anything about their future. No one can discover violence, chance, and reason. Just let's trust in God, okay? That is faithfulness through career fog. Thanks for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll know when I create a new video. Please also consider becoming a member at Motivationeer.com. Your membership really supports this channel. And don't forget, your career is not just a way to make a living, it's a way to transform the world.